Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. It's been quite the week for Nottingham Forest, and it's only Tuesday they find themselves in trouble with the Premier League and the FA for their tweet on Sunday night after defeat to Everton, with two further statements involving their stance yesterday. It looked initially like football was against them and they were being derided by plenty of fans, but are they now winning the PR war with many behind the wider message around VAR? Joining me to discuss that and the state of the club on and off the pitch is, first of all, broadcaster and Reds fan Darren Fletcher. Fletch, morning, how are you doing?
Morning, mate. Good, thank you.
Good to have you with us as ever. And second guest today is Reds legend Garry Birtles. Garry, how are you?
Very good, thank you, Matt. You good self?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad at all, thank you. Not too bad at all. Fletch, kick us off just with just your thoughts on how the situation's evolved from Sunday to yesterday. Forest asking for the audio to be released, and then a further statement saying, we're not questioning integrity, but we want to see transparency. A lot of people are behind that, the wider message. What's your view on it?
Yeah, look, I understand the sentiment. And I think when you've had as many decisions go against you this season as they have, then you would feel the way that they do. And I think if you exclude the initial tweet, then the way they've gone about it is fine. But they can't get away from the fact that when it's being said now that people's integrity aren't being questioned, etc., the initial tweet pointed out that Stuart Attwell was a Luton fan, and that directly did question his integrity. So we can't get away from that. We can't start changing history. That's out there, and that was said. And there was outrage when it was put like that, and I understand it. I also understand it from the club's perspective that they feel, and you have to watch Forest on a regular basis to know that they've got a pretty strong argument that a hell of a lot's gone against them this season. The three decisions on Sunday were penalties. I can't understand for the life of me how that process worked. I don't think it's necessarily an integrity thing. I don't think Stuart Attwell didn't give penalties on Sunday at Goodison Park because he's a Luton fan. But if you make the allegation that there was gross incompetence across the board on Sunday and previously this season, I don't think you can necessarily argue that. And I think that would be very difficult for the Pgmol to defend an allegation like that, because I think the standards have dropped. I think the standards now are poor. And I think too many of these situations are occurring week after week. So I fully understand Forest's fury, and I understand Forest's desire to have this changed and standards to be raised. I also understand that when you send a letter on Monday, as you're supposed to the Pgmol, and you get a reply basically quoting the rule book and an apology, when you're in a relegation fight and you should have had 3 penalties, that doesn't do anything for you. So it's a complete waste of time. So I also understand why they feel they've got to be stronger. I think what we can't get away from, though, is that they shouldn't have sent the tweet in the manner that they did after full time on Sunday, because that damages the reputation of Forest that's been built since 1865 through various great teams and great managers. So I can't agree with that. I do agree with the sentiment, and I do think that the standards have to be raised, because that was just incompetence on Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, you can't put the pin back in the grenade, and I think that's what they're trying to do to an extent. But I do feel like yesterday's statement around the audio was really good, and what they've said otherwise is the right sentiment. And so many fans are sick of VAR, Garry, that Forest are taking tangible action now, and hopefully this does lead to something constructive, because I don't think VAR is good enough. What's your view on the whole situation over the last few days, Garry?
Well, VAR clearly isn't fit for purpose. It's an absolute shambles. It really is. I mean, I agree with Fletch on what he said about the initial tweet, but you do things in the heat of the moment when you're very angry. And Forest have been very angry on many occasions so far this season, with good reason. You go back to the Willy Bolly sending off, and decisions like that, and one you going around the goalkeeper and being pulled down and penalty not being given, and there's so many more of them. I mean, those 3 decisions on Sunday were an absolute joke that they weren't given. Ashley Cole, you saw with the handball, as soon as it hit his arm, he put his arm behind his back, which is a clear message that I handled the ball there. And then the one in the second half, where the referee said he got the ball, then you should be looking at that and say, hold on a minute, in VAR, no, he didn't get the ball. Let's have a look at it. And, you know, Rayner was clearly clipped. I mean, it's just not rocket science. It's just poor standards by officials on the pitch and off the pitch. And it's got to stop, because a lot of people I'm talking to now are getting fed up of watching football. They're just losing the love of football. And it's just destroying our love of the game because of the decisions that keep being made. Players can't celebrate goals anymore. You look at the Coventry, you know, situation there. I mean, that was ludicrous, because the defender's coming backwards, the striker's coming backwards, and the defender's going forwards, and it's like an inch. You know, it's just staggeringly bad, and it's got to change during the summer. If it's not changed during the summer, you know, it'll be stupid. I think the arrogance sometimes of that, the Referees Association and all that, I just think it's overwhelming. Somebody mentioned to me on Sunday, it could have been unconscious bias. You know, they're talking about Attwell being the Luton fan. It could be unconscious bias, you know, where you're not meaning to do it, but it's in the back of your mind that, you know, they're behind. I don't know whether that's the case or not, but I know how bad it is. You know, people are saying about cheating. We got cheated by Anderlecht, you know, in the semi-final of a UEFA Cup, you know, game years ago in 1984. The referee was bought. He was paid off by the opposition. I know how it feels to be in a position like that, you know, and it was awful because we missed out on a final because of that, you know. So, you know, it's very emotive, but VAR has got to be turned upside down, or it's got to be got rid of. You can't keep going on week in, week out, having these conversations and it not change. It's just ridiculous.
Can I just make a point here that while we're sat on this podcast, I don't think in any way, shape or form, my own view, that Forest were cheated at the weekend. I don't. Gary can say that. I don't. And I don't think that Stuart Attwell's affinity to any football club had any bearing on what happened at the weekend. I don't. And I think that allegation has to go. And I'd like to see Forest walk back on that and say, look, maybe we did react hastily. That's not the message that we want. But what we do want is a thorough investigation into how this is all working on a weekly basis for the good of everybody in the game. But we can't turn around and support anybody who's questioning the credibility and the professionalism and the integrity of the officials in our country, because that's not what happens here. They might not be very good and they might be making a load of mistakes, but they're not doing it because they follow another football club. And that has to be said. And that is what I can't agree with. Whatever my loyalties to whatever club it is, I cannot support that. But I would support wholeheartedly a thorough look at how all this is being administered, whether it's good for the game, whether they've got people of a high enough caliber to do the job, and what changes need to be made, because we're not going to lose it. They're not going to take VAR away. There's too much money invested in it. So they've got to make it better. They've got to make it work properly. So I think everybody has to have an adult, grown-up conversation through a long lens and work out how you do that.
But Fletch, don't you think, honestly, that if Forest did make the comment before the game was played about, you know, they're worried a little bit about, you know, the affiliation with the football club from one of the officials, then they should look at it and say, hold on a minute, we're getting that much stick at the moment. You know, maybe it's a good idea, you know, just to change it, because if there's any controversy in that game, this might come to the forefront and we're in big trouble again. It's just easy to change it, isn't it?
Gaz, but I've seen one newspaper report that says Forest flagged it up, and I've seen another newspaper report that says that they didn't. So we what we can't deal with here is hearsay. He said, she said. This is not a he said, she said thing. This is bigger than that. This is incompetence on a grand scale that's affected a lot of football matches, not involving Forest, involving different teams over the course of the year, because there are officials in this country not good enough to administer VAR in a proper and professional manner. That's the problem. I think we're boiling it down to the minutiae of whether some fella follows Luton. That's not the issue, because there are umpteen decisions well into double figures over the course of the year where electronic decisions have decided the outcome of matches. And on many occasions, that's involved Forest. So I understand the sentiment. I'm going back to that. But this has got nothing to do with who supports who. This is whether people can do the job properly or not. And on this on this occasion, I think you can make a really strong case that Stuart Attwell at the weekend in partnership with Anthony Taylor, because let's not just put all this on Attwell, by the way. If I'm a referee on the field, right, and he's supposed to be our best, he's going to represent us at the Euros, and I've seen him do games in the Champions League, and I have to say, at that level, he does a relatively competent job, Anthony Taylor, right? But he has to be held accountable at some point for not seeing through his own naked eye that at least one of those decisions should be a penalty, and giving the VAR a reason to say you've got it wrong. By not making any decision, you're then giving Stuart Attwell in the VAR room fair scope to not make a decision, and then, hey, presto, none of the penalties get given. I think a better way of doing it at the weekend, and I'm using that 90 minutes as an example, if Anthony Taylor gives all 3 penalties and then goes to look at the screen, I don't think he changed his mind on any of them. I think he awards all 3. But by not giving the decision, you're then telling Stuart Attwell he's got to tell the referee that he's wrong 3 times, and I don't think they really want to do that. So I think the whole way, referees used to be out there to give decisions. They give less decisions now because they think they've got VAR to fall back on. But if the video assistant referee's not prepared to give them a nudge, it just goes. And I think, really, he has to be held accountable too. Surely you can see that. If you can't see challenges like that, you've got to question why he's out there in the first place. I mean, he certainly has to see at least one of them and go, that's a penalty, and then go and look at the screen and work it out. But so I think this is not all Stuart Attwell and Luton. Anthony Taylor's kind of getting lost in all this, but he didn't see any of the 3. So that kind of tells you that there was an issue with the video assistant and, in actual fact, the fella on the field as well. So that then becomes not a conspiracy theory. It goes back to the original point. It becomes incompetence. And there's a big difference, I think, in all of that. But it's as severe. It's as serious. If you're incompetent, that's as bad, because that means you're going to do it again.
It is total incompetence. It really is. But the third one, when he said he gesticulated that he thought he got the ball, well, the VAR is looking at that as well, and he would have probably seen that he didn't get the ball. Then,
yes.
You know, that
yes.
You're
and
wrong.
That is, Gary, that is a clear and obvious error, because the signal is ball. VAR knows it's not the ball. That, therefore, is a clear and obvious error. And at that point, you've got to say, well, you think he's got the ball. I'm telling you that he hasn't. So you better go and have a look. Then see what you think. Because you've not given it because you think he's touched the ball. You might give it if you realise that he hasn't. So that, again, that's both ways again, isn't it? But it's incompetence. It's just downright incompetence.
Yeah. I mean, I know people in the chat are saying there's some corruption and, Fletcher's on the inside and all that. But if you look across the whole season,
hang on. How am I on the inside exactly?
Because you work in the media.
What?
You work in the media.
I work
for the Referees Association. No, what's that got to do with anything? Absolute nonsense. Nonsense. On the inside, because I work for a television company. I work for the Pgmol. Do you think I'd stand here and say that Anthony Taylor and Stuart Attwell are incompetent if I'm on the inside? Do you think that's what Howard Webb's going to do when he pops up? Do you think he's going to say, my lads are incompetent? Or do you think he's going to defend them? Because he's on the inside. He runs the company. This is not a case of being on the inside. This is seeing it for what it is. And by the way, if the person that suggests that this is corruption is correct, and I don't know for certain that what the answer is, if that individual is correct, then the situation is way more serious than anybody thinks. Way more serious. If we've got to that stage, we're in a world of trouble, by the way.
Can I just go back?
I happen to not think that that's the case. And I think if people look at it objectively, I don't think I don't think even Forest really believe that that's the case. I think they've said it to be inflammatory, to make something happen, to create this storm around it that we're having now, which means that people have to look at it, have to do something about it. People now can't walk away from it. The Pgmol now can't leave it because it's so serious. The way it's been done might be bringing total disagreement from everybody by the allegation, but look at the conversation that everybody's having now. And I think as a football club, that's what they want. I don't think they've necessarily gone about it from the outset the right way, but the conversation's now being had, and now nobody can get away from it because all of these things are going to be looked at. So in a roundabout way, it's going to get discussed properly. And look, I'm the first to say this has to get better. I watched this in the Champions League and the Premier League, and it operates completely differently in the Champions League. I said this on Friday on the radio. It's unobtrusive. It's quicker. They don't interfere as much. And when they do interfere, it's because they've seen something that genuinely needs changing. What we do in the Premier League is we deal with the minutiae. Everything that happens, we want to look at it. So people are sick to death of it. The reality is there's probably once or twice a game, and on Sunday it would have been 3 times, where VAR need to intervene. The rest of it, leave it. Let the game go. Let the referee have the responsibility to make decisions. But they don't. So the conversation's now being had. But this has got nothing to do with anybody's on the inside or blah, blah, blah. If this was a situation of corruption, this would be the biggest thing to hit English football in the history of English football. There wouldn't be a bigger scandal if that's the case. So that's going to become nuclear if that was the case. The fact that I think it's probably more likely to be incompetence means that hopefully it can be solved and they can recruit better, train better, and maybe interpret the way this has all got to be used in a better way. But you know, I would stand and argue with anybody that the last thing this is corruption. Incompetent, yes, but corruption, no. And that's got nothing to do with where I work, who I work for, or what I do. That's just not the case.
Fletch, can I just go back to the Forest-Liverpool game at the City Ground? I've got to mention that again because that could have been averted on a massive scale. Giving the ball back to Liverpool instead of Forest, you got a 4th official standing on the touchline who could have said in the referee's earpiece, "You've given the ball back to the wrong team here. Give it." There's VAR as well, and they could have said they're not allowed to intervene. But who knows? You know, they just say it in the referee's ear. You know, you've given it. You're giving it to the wrong team. How can that be? Happening. You've got one on the touchline, one in the studio, and he's got it wrong, and not one of them's told him.
It's incompetence, guys. It's incompetence. It's downright incompetence.
Because we also saw a situation involving Liverpool as well with Spurs, where they said give a goal instead of don't give a goal. So it just shows, it's across the league. I think
the point that you'd make, Matt, is if this was only one club, then you could make a case for it being against the club, but it's not. Everybody at some stage, and there might be Forest supporters out there who would say, well, look, I go every week and I can tell you that we've had more of it than anybody else. And if they said that, I would take it. Fine. But this is everybody. You set any football fan down from the Premier League and go through the season and they will give you a list of things that have been done badly and they've just had to swallow it. And this is the problem. The clubs just have to swallow it. There's no way to go back and redo it. And the issue with Forest is, I think the timing of these decisions and incidents are huge because they would have had a penalty at 0-0. That then changes the entire game if they score. Everton have lost 6-0 last time out. They go a goal down at home and that place turns quickly and that becomes a different afternoon for the players. So when they've got a lead because Forest don't get the penalty, it's a different ground. And that was so... That game was going to be so dictated to by who scored the first goal because of the pressure that both teams were under. That makes that first penalty decision even more important. So, but everybody's having to deal with this. Forest are having to deal with it in their own way. But you see it right across and it's such a shame because this is such a good season that you don't really want this kind of stuff to be front and centre all the time. And I promise you, we'll get to this weekend and there'll be other decisions again where they're looking at it on Match of the Day or wherever going, I can't believe they've done that. Why? It's every week, I'm afraid. They're just not good enough at the moment to do the job that they're supposed to be doing. And that's down to the Pgmol to help people get better.
Can I just say something as well? We weren't good enough as Nottingham Forest on Sunday against them. I don't think Jordan Pickford had a save to make in the second half. And that's how bad we were. We didn't play well. The penalty situations have probably masked that a little bit, but we just weren't good enough on the day to get anything out of that game.
Yeah, I do want to come back to that, definitely. And the other thing, just before we wrap up on VAR, I would say, is they need to have clear thresholds of what the hell is a penalty now, because they seem to move the goalposts throughout the season around handball. I mean, we saw at the weekend, last weekend, Man, you get a penalty for a handball. I don't think was a penalty. This weekend, we don't get one. then Man U get one against them against Coventry, which is just an identical incident, I would say. So
I was just about to mention, somebody said that. I didn't see that penalty, and somebody said it was exactly the same as the Ashley Young one in the Everton game.
Yeah,
was it?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a lack of clarity. The other thing I was going to raise was Henry Winter on Twitter today saying Howard Webb wants ex-pros fast-tracked and specialist VARs. Is that a positive move, Gary, for you?
Hold on a minute. How many times have I said this, Matt? I was at the initial thing at where did they do it? At Stockley Park.
Stockley Park.
We all had to go and have a session in front of the screens, pick out different incidents and see what was what. Everybody in the media had to do that. Radio, television, commentators, co-commentators. And I went down there and they gave these, I think, 4 or 5 scenarios and asked us to look at them and see what we thought. And I picked up on at least 2 that they'd not seen. I went to Neil Swarbrick after and I said, look, that happened. And they went, oh, didn't see that. And they admitted they'd not seen it. I said, you know what you need? This is before it's even started. I said, you need an ex-pro with a referee to do it, because referees haven't played a game. Players know the nuances of, diving and whatever. And, it just makes a perfect partnership to go in there and do it. It's just not rocket science again.
No. Greg Oram solved the whole problem here of actually VAR. Birtles to Stockley Park, the transfer we all need to see that will solve everything. Just before we move on, Fletch, any thoughts on that notion of what Henry Winter's tweeting?
Right. It's been said for 25, 30 years. It's not new, is it? He's not the first guy to say, oh, let's fast track ex-pros. I know I tell you something, I think I'm right in saying, guys, that didn't Nigel at one point, Nigel Clough, consider going down the route of being a referee, but when he looked at it, he would have been about a year in the Premier League because it would have taken that long to go through all the necessary processes to become qualified to be a Premier League referee. That the age you are when you retire as a player means at the retirement age of a referee, it would only give you a year, 18 months, that kind of time to be a Premier League ref. So there's not a great deal of point for them to do it. So
they are with VAR, it is. There are so many pros out there, ex-pros, who would love.
Oh, he's back. You're back?
He's back.
He's back. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Carry on.
You got cut off in your prime there, guys.
Oh.
Hack down from behind.
No, it's ex-players would go and do that. The current crop of players, probably wouldn't. But, my generation would love to go and do it and, do a good job because, you've got 2 people in there then, you can, chew the fat between you. And, it's ex-players have got that much knowledge of what goes on a football pitch because they've felt it, they've seen it, in many situations. And what better to have that there than not, because the assistant referees get the stick, the VAR get the stick, players going in there would be a massive help to everybody.
I do want to talk about some football.
And what's not. And those lines that they keep drawing, that wouldn't change. An ex-player can't change that.
Let's talk some football in the second half of the show. But before that, obviously, we are playing Man City next. We'll get our thoughts on that initially. Do enjoy the build-up to the game at the Trent Navigation, the new matchday experience with Simon Fotheringham as your host, the best place to go and enjoy the build-up to any Forest game at the Nav. And they're also showing live football on Sky. Is it the early game? Are you commentating on an early game on Saturday, Fletch, that will be shown at the Nav?
Yes, West Ham Liverpool.
Yeah, excellent. Well, there you go, an advert. Yeah, right. Just looking at this team that we're seeing, the actual team on the pitch, Gary, and I'll get Fletcher's take on this as well. Is this a team that's got relegation written all over it, or do you see enough in it that they're going to stay up still? Well,
it has a little bit, because if you can't get a shot in 45 minutes to test an opposition goalkeeper with a team 1 place above you, then you're a little bit worried. And again, somebody mentioned to me, I always say this, Elanga on the bench and then coming on. His pace causes problems. And I always thought, Brian Clough always used to say, if you're in that situation, right, I'm starting you, give me as long as you can, and I'll carry off. You might be 1-0 up there. He might create a goal. He might do something. He might score one. And he might get injured. But I'd rather have him on from the start than bring him on when it's too late. Again, we've done that too many times. Just play your best team that you've got. Start out with your best 11, and then if something happens, a manager can't, help if anything happens on the pitch. All he can do is pick a team, put them out there, and then the rest is up to them. And, I just find it baffling that they bring the players on when it's too late, when we're losing games. Get them on to start with.
I watched Luton, Fletch, before our game, and they were so bad. They could have lost. They could have shipped 10 goals. So it's terrible, but I still think they're our best chance of survival at the moment, because I don't see us winning more than one game. I mean, what's your take on us as a football team at the moment versus Luton and the other teams down there?
The biggest concern I have is that they made a managerial change, and I don't really think it's made a blind bit of difference. I don't think we're in any different situation in the league as we would have been. I'm a little bit surprised by what I see. Too many team changes. There's no stability. Changes all the time. Key areas of the team where Garry would tell me better than this, but you need partnerships. We're constantly rotating centre halves. There's a lot to be said for centre backs learning to play with each other, and it is a team that concedes a lot of goals. Different areas of the pitch, a lot of changes. Doesn't seem to be a consistent blend in central midfield. That seems to change a lot. And they can't defend set pieces. I mean, 22 goals from set pieces, which is, outrageous. That's an outrageous number. I mean, it's so far in front of everybody else. It shows you how outrageous it is. And you can only presume that not enough time's being spent on the training pitch in terms of organisation and defending set pieces, because and it's normally the same kind of goal. If you see it, that it's not a variation. It's normally the same kind of delivery that causes the problem and leads to the goal. So I think there are some big fundamental issues that Forest have, and I don't know necessarily whether there's the mental strength in the group. I mean, a lot of the goals are avoidable. I thought that the first goal on Sunday, somebody just has to go and close the ball down. I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do. You've got to be prepared to do the work to get there to block it, and it's not a goal. So again, are they mentally strong enough? They concede a lot of late goals. Are you mentally strong enough? It's not just about the physical attributes of a footballer and whether you can stick the ball in the net. This ability to manage games has been a problem all season. How many times have they had a lead? I mean, that's been an issue from promotion, really, back to the top flight, that we've blown. I think it's over 50 points that Forest have given away with a lead. And I mean, that again is way out in front of everybody else in the league. So there are fundamental problems that they have. And at this time of the year, you can't really see any of that changing. And the fixtures they've got, I mean, Sheffield United don't like Forest by any stretch of the imagination. And they're going to be giving everything, because they've not given their fans a great deal all season. You're going to get the best of them. Now, whether that's good enough to beat Forest, we'll wait and see. Burnley might need to win on the last day to stay in the league, because they've come up for air all of a sudden. They've stuck at it and they're scoring goals. And the two home matches, Manchester City and Chelsea, it's difficult. And I said in the summer, I didn't think there was any way that the Forest team, based on the recruitment, could get relegated this season, because I think these are the three weakest teams in the bottom three that we've had in the top flight for a long time. And believe me, if they do stay up, next season's going to be even harder, because better teams are coming into the league. And here they are, even with the points deduction. If you give them the points back, they're only 5 clear of Luton, which I just don't think is good enough. With the money spent by the owner, the recruitment that they've made, they should be better than that by now. So I think it's very, very, very disappointing. And if they do stay up, I fear they're going to do it by the skin of their teeth. And that worries me, because I just look at Burnley right now, and they're just starting to gain a little bit of momentum. They're just gaining a little bit of belief. They're just going that way. And then you kind of look at Forest, and they're just dipping and dipping and dipping. And you're looking for something to change the tide. And, I think it's a serious situation, really serious situation that they're in.
I saw a comment from one fan after the game I think it was on Twitter. He's saying, how can we be done for FFP and still be that bad and still be down there at the bottom? And it's there's a lot of money been spent and we're still there. I honestly think we've got to go 3 at the back, like we did last season. We did that at the back end of last season. Joe Worrell came in, and we got the result against Arsenal. I think we look more stabilised there. It gives the fullbacks more, wherewithal to go forward and get involved. And if I don't know how Wanyi's, if he's anywhere near fitness, Alanga's obviously struggling a little bit, but you've only got 4 or 5 games left, so you just ask your players to give everything they possibly can, get them out there, and if they get injured, yeah, fine, but just get your best players on that pitch and stick to what you think is your best 11, your best formation, and then go for it. If you get beat, then you get beat. But yeah, I think it's going to be a difficult run-in. It wouldn't surprise me if we got anything against Man City or Chelsea. We seem to get better results against the better teams than the teams we should be beating around us, which is, is not.
I mean, I think this weekend will tell us a lot about Burnley. They've got Man United away, who are Man United are terrible. So I wouldn't rule out Burnley getting anything there.
But a Championship side should have beaten them, but they didn't. But Man United, they're a shambles as well at the moment. It's just staggering.
Yeah, they're awful. You've seen a lot of City, Fletch, just before we get round up or get to final thoughts. Do you give us any prayer against City, considering they play last, so they'll know the Arsenal and Liverpool results?
You've always got a prayer. I mean, you've always got a prayer. I mean, Forest got a draw against them last season. You've always got a prayer. I mean, logic would tell you that they're going to lose that by quite a margin. But I wouldn't sit there and say they've got no chance. But I think when you've got 4 games to go and you're only clear by a point, and you've got 2 home games against Man City and Chelsea, and then you've got 2 away games. Again, one of the teams you're going to play away might need to beat you to stay up. I mean, this is as difficult as it gets. And I think at least by this stage of last season, they'd learned how to manage games. They were able to win games 1-0, and they were, as Garry said, they weren't too bad with the back 3 or back 10 as it turned out to be. But it worked. It was Nees must at the time. And they got a bit of leadership on the field as well. They got players who would talk, etc. I look at it now and it's all a bit quiet and I'm waiting for somebody to go and take responsibility. I just think the 4 games are a lottery. And I think everybody else's running is the same. The only question I would ask you is right now, who would you fancy to nick a result? Would you fancy Forest to nick one? Would you fancy Luton to nick one? Would you fancy Burnley to nick one? I don't think we're the team with momentum of the sides who are threatened. So it's worrying. The last team you want at the minute is Man City, for crying out loud. I mean, they're trying to make history and win 4 top-flight titles in a row and be the first English club side since year dot to do that. So, I mean, they're ultra-focused on doing that. I mean, they're not going to be coming and taking a backward step. That's what Guardiola wants to do. So they're going to be as good as they can be, I'm sure, when they turn up at the City ground. It's a massive dogfight that they're in. I mean, that point they've got now is so important. That 1 point. I always say, when you get to this stage of the season, sometimes people leave a ground and they're disappointed with a draw. But when you stay in a league and you're in a relegation battle, you tend to stay up by about a point, don't you? Or 2. And you look back and you go, what a great point that was. If we hadn't got that point. So it's these moments in games where you've got a point in the bag and you maybe make a bad decision to go and try and win the game and concede a goal in transition, which they're good at. If you hang on for points in those games, it just keeps that gap wider, puts the pressure on the teams around you, and I think that's something that Forest haven't been good enough at doing this season.
There's nobody told Nuno that we can't defend a lead. We try to. He changes things. He brings 3 subs on, brings 3 creative players off. Just keep the same team out there, and subs coming on, as I've said many times before. You struggle to get straight into the game because you're not on the same wavelength as players who've been out there from, the kickoff, and it becomes difficult. And we've done that so many times. And like you say, Fletch, we've lost games or drawn games or thrown them away. And, it's not good enough at that level. If you do that, you get punished. We've seen it time and time again.
One thing I do think we've got is like a Fulham performance in us, which I don't know if the other teams do. Maybe Burnley do. They did concede a lot of chances against Sheffield United. So if they get another win, I'll worry about them.
We beat Aston Villa 2-0. We can beat teams on any given day, but it's the Everton performance, especially. We started the game particularly well, but then we didn't score, and it seems like the mentality is right. Oh, we've been that good for 15 minutes, but we've not scored, and then it goes flat, and the opposition get back into the game, and you can't let that happen. like Fletch mentioned at Goodison, the mood there, if Everton go behind, is terrible. And, if we'd have got one in that early stages, probably that would have happened. But then to just drop back and just go into malaise a little bit and, go on the back foot instead of the front foot against a team one place above you, it's a no-brainer. Just go there and be positive. Get on the front foot. If you lose by being positive, that's not a problem. But if you lose by being negative and not getting their keeper to save a shot in the second half, then people start asking questions, and rightly so.
I think one thing to take into account as well is of the 4 games left, Sheffield United will be the only team with nothing to play for. So Manchester City are chasing a title, Chelsea are trying to get into Europe, and Burnley are trying to survive. So the likelihood is that 3 of the 4 matches, they're going to face motivated teams with something to play for. The best thing you can have at this stage of the season, a team's in mid-table or on holiday already. Nobody wants to get injured and spend the summer in the treatment room, so you don't tend to get the commitment that you might get at other times. They're going to face 3 really committed groups. And I think people are talking about Man City and talking about Burnley. Don't sleep on Chelsea. Chelsea's last 2 defeats have been the League Cup final at Wembley on penalties and the FA Cup semi-final against Manchester City. Apart from that, I think it's 9 more games they're unbeaten. Cole Palmer's as good as anybody in the league right now, and he's going to give Forest nightmares. And they are better now than they were. They're not the soft touch that they might have been pre-Christmas. He's put them together now, Pochettino. He's got a settled side. He knows what he's doing. They've got goals in them, and they're a lot more solid. There's more belief, and that's a really difficult game against Chelsea, because if he can get through this season, Pochettino, and get them into Europe, he'll see that as a win. And he'll see that as a building block for next season to try and kick on. If they win tonight, as we record this against Arsenal, they'll go 7th. They'll go above West Ham, above Man United, and right in the thick of that European push with 4 games themselves left to play. So they're going to be turning up in Nottingham, hugely motivated by the opportunity they've got, with a team full of talent. So the 2 home games are absolute stinkers right now in Manchester City and Chelsea. I think if they stay, the mad thing is, as bad as Forest are away from home overall as a Premier League side, I think they'll stay up away if they're going to stay in the Premier League. I think they'll pick the points up away. I think they'll struggle to get stuff at the City ground against City and Chelsea.
Of course, here we've got the hearing tomorrow as well, haven't we, for the point deduction?
Yeah,
but
true. As Jackie says, there's over 500 people watching. So, do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. Palace v West Ham showed what it's like when you play a team with nothing to play for, because, West Ham are out of Europe. They got absolute steamrolled. One other point, Fletch, and this probably goes to why.
I was surprised by that. They're not. I mean, they can still.
I know what you're saying.
Get back in. I mean, I think the West Ham situation is bizarre with David Moyes, and now they're interviewing Ruben Amorim while David Moyes is still the manager. I mean, it's crazy. I would just make the point that if that was our owner doing that, then he'd be criticised in every newspaper this morning for being a bizarre individual. But the fact West Ham do it, nobody seems to care. So there you go.
This probably goes to the wider point about how we are as a club right now, Fletch. But even Sunday or even yesterday, a lot of the whole fan base felt terribly divided after the back of the season ticket situation and the price hike. I think it's maybe slightly different now. It feels a bit more unity on the back of Forest statements yesterday. I mean, does that give us some, the collective unity, I think, is a big factor. Is that coming back now, do you think? So I know you were worried, and we spoke the other day about you were worried about off-the-pitch messaging and where we were as a club. Do you think that might change this week now, or has the season ticket thing done quite a lot of damage?
If I speak about the fan base before we talk about the pricing, I think the one thing that Forest can rely on the rest of the season is the fan base. I don't think the supporters are going to do anything to the detriment of the team. That's not the way they're built. And Forest can, if Forest get from the team what they're going to get from the supporters, they'll stay in the division. That's not a problem. The wider picture in terms of the annoyance of certain things that have happened, I fully understand. I think there are 2 things that need to be raised. Number one, I think it's an outrageously bad decision to charge people £10 to be on a waiting list for a season ticket that you're probably not going to get. I don't think there's the necessity to take £10 off loyal supporters. If you get 10,000 on the waiting list, you generate 100 grand. What difference does that make? I don't think that's the owner's decision. That has to be someone else within the club, because he's a billionaire and doesn't need 100 grand. And I don't think he'd do that. That has to be someone else. And I think that's it's a really bad decision. And I would implore the club to stop doing it and to give people their money back, because you shouldn't have to pay to be on a waiting list to get a season ticket that you're probably not going to get. I think it's a massive own goal. And it comes at the same time when the price rises, I think, are too high. I don't think it's fair. And my concern is that if you can afford your season ticket, fine. If you can't, and you've been a season ticket holder for a long time, we can't lose those people. They shouldn't be priced out of football at this stage. This is not that long ago that Forest were at the bottom end of the Championship. In football terms, it's not that long ago that they were mid-table in League One. And the same people who are being priced out of it now were the supporters who were loyal then. I don't think there's any need to put the prices up to the level that they have, because I think financially, what does it get you? £3-4 million additionally? Well, they're going to be given 150 from the Premier League if they stay in. So financially, it's not going to make an impact. I would have liked to have seen prices frozen, not increased, because I think that would have been a good thing to do. Certainly based on the prospect of being in the Championship next season, it's hard to justify charging those prices. And I think I can understand and totally support the anger of people who might now have to turn around to their kids and say, we can't go to Forest anymore because I can't afford the season ticket. I can't get individual match tickets because they don't exist. And I think it's the wrong thing to do. I don't know for the life of me why they've sat down as a group and thought, yeah, this will go down well. I don't think they're in touch with the city in that regard. It's a working class city with a lot of loyal people, and Forest means a lot to a lot of people. And if you start to take them away, you'll never get them back. And it's a really dangerous thing to do. And I would hope that in the cold light of day, that sense prevails and they look at it and say, do you know what? We've got a bit much here. We don't need to do it. Let's rethink it, because I don't want to see people. As I said to somebody the other day, I said, it's crazy because I've lived in the city all my life and I've seen numerous managers, numerous owners, hundreds of players, and they change all the time. But the one thing that you tend to see when you go down is the same people time after time. People have been sat in that seat for however many years. And we can't price those people out. It's impossible. Can't. There was such a bond between the club and the city on promotion through that promotion season into the market square. Last season, it was astonishing for people to come and experience, down to the people who were in there. We can't lose those people because they're being priced out of it. It's stupid. One of the key aspects of Forest is the fan base and the joining together of club and city. It's massive, and you can't drive a wedge between that because you want to put prices up. If this was a club that needed the price to go up because otherwise they were going to be in a mess, I get it. But that's not the way it is. They've got a billionaire owner and they've got Premier League money. So raising ticket prices and pricing certain fans out of it won't make a blind bit of difference to the grand scheme of things. So I'm completely with the people who are furious about that decision. And the two things really wound me up. The 10 quid to go on a waiting list and the size of the price hikes. I think both of them were unnecessary.
Yeah, I think the fan base is something we need to harness and not distance. It's such a big asset. So that was my feelings on it. Just before we go to Garry for any final thoughts, if you haven't already done so, do give us a favour and hit like. The more people that like it, the more people YouTube make sure sees the video, and you can subscribe and give us a good view on iTunes and Spotify, hopefully. Garry, any final thoughts or anything you want to raise before we go?
No, I think we've had a really good rant about the good the things that deserve to be ranted about, because it's got to change. Like I said earlier, the number of people I've spoken to are just fed up, totally and utterly fed up of VAR and the linesman's flag going up late, and not being able to celebrate. Imagine the player. I mean, you saw the lad who scored the goal for Coventry against Man United. The celebrations there, and everybody thought, United are out. What a great result. And all of a sudden, bang, it's gone. That one moment that could be, there for the rest of your life has been taken away by, ridiculous margins. And just change it during the summer. Sit down, get ex-players in, and try your best to put it right, because honestly, people are getting totally and utterly fed up with it.
Excellent. Fletch, any final? I know you're going to look at your thoughts there, but anything you want to add just before we go, Fletch?
No. I think Gaz has just summed it up really well there.
Yeah, lots of ground covered in the last 45 minutes. Thanks for everyone's company. 550 people with us, which is great. We'll be back tomorrow at some point. And I spoke to Rick Parfitt Jr. as well about his gig and Nav. Lovely guy, a new Forest fan, but he certainly seems enamoured with the club. So we'll have that. And then we'll have the Man City preview from the opposition point of view and our preview before the post-match stream. So do join us for all that if you can. Garry, thank you very much.
An absolute pleasure as always.
Absolutely. Fletch, thank you for your time.
Okay, mate. Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone, and we shall see you soon.